This is a story that not many people know, but like a lot of people saw externally. Like the situation when I was in my leaving cert year, towards the end of it, I shaved my head, right? A lot of people like didn't really understand why. A lot of people thought it was funny, and it was funny. Like, oh, I looked like a coconut. Like it was ridiculous.
No way.
I'll probably put a picture like on the screen of what it looked like because it's just atrocious. But I'll tell you why I did that and what the reasoning behind that was that in my own insecurity and I guess even in pride as well, I just felt so down about myself and I felt so like unworthy and like ugly and like all these different negative emotions in myself. There was a situation of I was just like a little part of me is like, no, of course you're not. Like that voice inside of you that will tell you like, no, like that's not who you are. Like you're a human being. Like there's no need to think about yourself that way. But then when you're like consumed with your pride and what you should be and what you want to be, then it's like, oh, you're not these things, or you're ugly, or you're
Yeah.
worthless, or you're horrible, and all this kind of stuff, right? And it just became this like internal struggle where it's just so exhausting and it's so tiring of like, am I this or am I that? And it just comes to a stage where you're just like, I gotta pick something. That's like I just need to like choose which side I'm on because this internal struggle is just like destroying me. And unfortunately, in my situation, I gave into those kind of negative emotions. I was like, you know what? Fine, I am ugly and I'm unworthy and I'm worthless and I'm all these things. And it's like you look for some kind of element of control in that situation. So I was like, in my mindset, I was like, you know what? I'm so sick of feeling these ways and like constantly trying to look better and constantly trying to like do my best to not
Mm.
feel that way. And it's like, you know what? Fine, I give up. I'm done fighting this emotion. You're right. That's my definition. That's who I am. And it became a situation. I was like, you know what? The line that stuck with me in my mind for all these years, and the thing that I kind of like look back on is like in my own head, I was so tired of feeling that way that I was like, you know what? If I'm gonna feel ugly, I'm gonna feel ugly on my own terms. I'm gonna like put my control into the situation. I'm just
Mm.
gonna lean into it. I'm gonna shave my head and like where I wasn't like those things beforehand, I kind of like adopted that mantle afterwards. So even if I wasn't ugly and if even I wasn't like unattractive beforehand, when I shaved my head, I absolutely was. You know what I mean? Like when you give into those kind of
Yeah,
emotions, you know what I mean?
yeah,
And your pride's just there in the back of your head, like laughing at you. Like, oh, I convinced you that you were this thing, and now you became that thing.
yeah.
That's like the danger of your perception and the idea of self-identifying, right? Is that when you identify with the wrong things, or when you create your identity in things that aren't actually who you are, or from negative sources, or from like trauma, or from circumstances, or from whatever your perception might be, you can actually become that thing. Which is why self-identity is like it's not really so much a right as much as it is a responsibility. You root yourself in the right things that you find positive and like strengthening kind of things to identify yourself with. Because I can tell you one thing is that like it was a real hard thing to shave my head then and to see the difference between what I was before and what I was then after. I'll tell
Mm.
you one thing, the second I shaved my head, I was like, man, I wish I hadn't done that. I wish I could go back because I just now gave in and adopted that
Yeah.
mantle of, you know what, now I am ugly. Now I am awful. And it became a situation of like I was just going through this inner turmoil, and it was just so exhausting and so difficult to deal with that I was just like, you know what, I can't do this anymore. It's unbearable. And like where in my case, I'm lucky that it was like shaving my head. But in so many other cases, it's people do more serious things, or they might
Mm.
hurt
Yeah,
themselves, or they
yeah.
might even in a lot of tragic situations, they might take their life. You know, is that when you listen to these voices, that when you let these kind of things define who you are, when you create your identity in pain or in trauma or in turmoil, as opposed to strength and overcoming and conquering all this kind of stuff, is that you will honestly become that thing. Which is why you really have to guard your mind and why you have to really like root yourself in positive influences because you can make mistakes and then the second you like give into it you're like, oh man, I wasn't. Because you see that physical change. Like I had hair beforehand, I was not like super attractive, I was just like normal, you know what I mean, like
Yeah,
just
yeah, yeah.
regular
Average.
person. Exactly, average,
Average
mid,
Joe.
whatever, you know what I mean. But then the second you make that choice, it's true now, and it's a thing of like, okay, that is who I am now. So like for anybody who was in my secondary school or who knew me at that time, who saw me shave my head, now you have the insight as to why. But like I'm not afraid to share it because if one person out there like understands that what those voices are telling them at the moment isn't true, or that you're not unworthy, or that you're not ugly, or that you're not all these things, like those voices are trying to push you into that. They're trying to like make you adopt that idea and that like kind of whatever. But that's wrong. It's not true. You're not unworthy. You're not ugly. You're not unattractive. You're not stupid. You're not any of these things. That your circumstances and your perception aren't defined by those things. It's defined in who you choose to be. And that's the really key thing with self-identity, is that it's who you choose to become,
Mm.
right? Which is why you have to like really root it in positive things. And something you see so often is like people like identify with some of the craziest stuff out here. Like you see people at the absolute extremes
Yeah,
who are marginalized because
crazy.
a real key thing about human beings is that we want to be accepted. We want to be part of community. We want to
Mm.
be together with other people. We don't want to feel like we're different and
Yeah.
ostracized and like at the very fringes of society, right? So when society, like when someone is different and society kind of just pushes that person away and isolates them, you're going to look for that community, or you're going to look to that connection with anything. You're going to try to find it in anywhere you can kind of get that warmth. And sometimes people choose it in like the worst and the wrong things, whether it might be, we'll say for example, it might be drugs, or might be identifying themselves with like, I know for example, like I've seen clips of people like for example who might like identify as like an animal, or as like I saw someone recently, like someone identified as a wolf,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I have no doubt that that person fully like has adopted that, and that in their mind it's not like some joke or like they're
Mm.
acting or they're anything. It's like looking for that kind of connection or that kind of like community with whatever will accept you. And when society is like being
Yeah.
awful to you and
Yeah.
rejecting you and constantly bullying you and telling you that
I
you're
just
all
want
these
that
horrible things,
inclusivity, like.
that's all we want. We want to be a part of something, and people find that like that label or that category and like the wrong things sometimes. You know what I mean? Which is why like it's really important to kind of check your influences, check like where things are coming from, check what's pushing you into that identity. You know what I mean? Like be aware of yourself. And it's hard to look the trauma in the eyes sometimes, and it's hard to be able to say like I was like thinking like the wrong way, and I was like a perfect example is when I look at that the 17 or 18-year-old version of myself who felt that way. Like if I took myself out of it and just looked at it as a human being, like just a random human being who was feeling that way, you'd feel heartbroken for that person. You'd pull that like shaver out of their hand and you're like, no, hold on a second. Like that's not who you are.
Yeah.
That's a lie. That's a falsehood. That's a deception. And like even though in that moment I fully identified with what that was and like, oh, this is my identity now. This is who I am. This is like how I view myself. It was a lie, but I fully believed it, like 110%. You know what I mean? It was fully who I was in that moment. But like looking back now, I can say, no, I was wrong. That's not who I was. I was listening to the wrong influences, which is why I try to ground myself in better
That's
things now. You
growth.
know, like when you think about it, like you were made in the image of God. Like as a Christian, like that is my view. Like that I am made in the image of God. That I'm a part of this
Mm.
community. That I'm loved. That I'm cared about. That I'm special, and that I'm unique. And that it's like when you think again, we talk about it strategically. Like there's this ongoing battle between good and evil, right? Good will try to tell you that you are part of a bigger community, that you are a child of God, that you are special and you're beautiful and you're unique. And then that deceiver, that like evil side will tell you, no, you're not loved. You're ugly. You're these all
Yeah.
these kind of things. You should be you
But
should be
like
better.
you feed more into the bad than the good too.
Oh, there's an old thing
Like
where it's like you've got two wolves inside of you and they're both hungry, and it's like, okay, well, which one wins? It's like the one you feed. It's like you have got good inside, you've got evil. It's like
mm,
the one that wins is the one you decide to indulge, the one you decide to feed, the one you decide to engage with, right?
yeah.
So, kind of just the biggest message I just want to give for people in the podcast episode today, if you can learn from my experience, is that when it comes to self-identifying, yes, it's your right to identify as whatever you want, but it's your responsibility to identify with the right things, to not forsake your identity for something that might not be who you are. Or when you look for like community, or when you look for that kind of togetherness, it's better to be alone in who you really are than to be in a community where you're a lie, when you're not
Yeah.
really, when you're just trying to find that community, when you're trying to find that togetherness, when you're trying to find that connection with people. Like root it in positive things, and please like never question your own value. Never think that your life means nothing, or that it's worthless, or
Yeah.
that it's any of these kind of things, because I can tell you right now, I've been there myself and I know that feeling, and it is a lie. It is a deception. It is a thing designed to make you feel that way. And that's why it's very important to be aware of this idea of good versus evil in the world. So be aware if you are made in the image of God, and that deceiver just wants to take that from you, to steal that identity from you, to say you're nothing, you're garbage, you're worthless. Here, do this, or join this, or be this label. The only label you need to worry about is a human being made in the image of God, who is beautiful, loved, and special. And that's the kind of direction that you got to work towards. So if anyone takes something from the podcast today, please understand that you are valued, and that you're not nothing just because you're different, and that you're not, if you're isolated and you're on the fringes of society, that like that's not your problem. That's the people who pushed you there.
Mm.
That's on them. It's not
Mm.
on you that you can't find that community, that find that togetherness. That those people are wrong to push you to that point. But don't give into that lie. Don't give into that deception. Well, that's all we really have for you for episode 7, and we'll see you in episode 8. Thanks for tuning in, guys.
Peace.